Once upon a time, almost every publisher refused Harry Potter, and the only one that agreed offered J.K. Rowling an advance that, by industry standards, was considered almost insulting, but she accepted because back then, for her, that was big money. And then came enormous success and an equally famous film adaptation. Warner bought the rights to the first Harry Potter books for just $2 million, but Rowling sold them with a whole list of restrictions and demands, like the requirement that the main roles must be played only by British actors. Rowling also kept the right to veto any questionable ideas from the studio, and that's exactly what happened when Harry Potter was going to be turned into an animated movie. Because the studio was afraid that the children would grow up too fast, and the standard child actors growing up problem would appear, people simply wouldn't want to watch them anymore, but they couldn't come to an agreement with the writer. After that, Warner approached one of the most influential directors in Hollywood, Steven Spielberg, and he agreed to direct Harry Potter. But problems came up again, because initially Steven also wanted to make it a full-length animated film. And again, Rowling refused. Although many people say this whole conflict was also because Spielberg wanted to move the story to the United States and replace everything with a typical American school. Rowling absolutely didn't like that, so Steven walked away from Potter. After Spielberg, many directors could have made the movie, people like Terry Gilliam, Ivan Reitman, and Wolfgang Peterson, but all of them refused for different reasons. Either they didn't want to get involved with fantasy, or they were too busy. In the end, the producers offered the movie to Chris Columbus. He supposedly refused at first, but his children convinced him, and he agreed. Then the problems with casting Harry began. Columbus immediately suggested Daniel Radcliffe, but it turned out Radcliffe's parents didn't want it to affect their son's studies, so they had to watch about 5,000 different actors, and there were suitable candidates among them. But Rowling rejected them because they weren't British. In the end, everyone came back to Radcliffe, and here there are different versions. Some say the studio managed to convince Daniel's parents that it wouldn't affect his performance at school. Others say they were simply paid $1 million, and that changed their opinion. Emma Watson was fighting her way through thousands of girls at auditions, and Rupert Grint got the role in a very unusual way. He sent a video where, in rap style, he explained why the role should go to him. Columbus watched it, thought it was an interesting approach, and approved him for the part. Then filming started, and the only major problem was time. Different locations where they wanted to shoot were often unavailable. Because of that, the premiere had to be delayed by 5 months. But the studio didn't want to delay it any longer. And because of that, there was basically almost no time left for post-production. Filming ended in March 2001, and the premiere was already supposed to happen in November. Later, because of this, Chris Columbus complained that they didn't have enough time to bring the visual effects to a proper level. The first Harry Potter movie arrived in theaters alongside another famous fantasy film, The Lord of the Rings. But in the end, Harry Potter earned more at the box office, $975 million versus $868 million for The Fellowship of the Ring. The scale of the success became clear immediately. So just a few days after the premiere, filming for Chamber of Secrets started. Daniel Radcliffe had a pretty funny contract. To convince him to star, they paid him $1 million. But for the sequel, he was going to get only $200,000. The British Actors Union objected to that. As a result of negotiations, Daniel's fee increased 10 times. For the sequel, he got more than $2 million. Chris Columbus convinced the studio that the sequel should be a little darker. To do that, they muted the colors a bit and made the lighting weaker. And every next Harry Potter movie would become darker and darker. Chamber of Secrets also had problems in post-production. The movie was cut quite a lot, but not because of bad test screenings, because of the runtime. The studio insisted on a runtime of less than 3 hours. Because of that, they had to cut out a couple of characters. But even so, Chamber of Secrets became the longest film in the series. It runs 2 hours and 40 minutes. Chamber of Secrets again released in theaters next to The Lord of the Rings. This time, it was up against The Two Towers, and in 2002, the victory went to The Lord of the Rings. The film earned $947 million. Harry Potter earned $878 million, which was less than the first film. But the success was still enormous. In the UK, Chamber of Secrets became the first film to sell 9 million tickets in its first weekend after hitting theaters. It was assumed that Chris Columbus would direct all the Harry Potter movies. But after finishing work on the sequel, he went home. Officially, because he wanted to spend more time with his family. Unofficially, because the movies had to be shot almost non-stop. He agreed to stay as a producer, but after the third film, he left the franchise completely. The studio began searching for a director. They offered the movie to Guillermo del Toro. He refused to direct it, but recommended his friend, Alfonso Cuarón. Cuarón had just made Ay, tu mamá también, but the studio didn't want anything that wild in Harry Potter. However, it turned out J.K. Rowling was a big fan of that film, and she fully supported that director. A lot of people attribute the significant freedom Cuarón was given on set to Rowling's influence. There were restrictions though. Alfonso is a well-known expert in bad words, and on set, he usually doesn't hold back. A special clause in his contract forbade him from swearing in front of the children. There was another moment that had to be fixed urgently. Actor Richard Harris died. He played Albus Dumbledore in the first two films. They tried to replace him with Ian McKellen, who played Gandalf in The Lord of the Rings, but Ian refused the offer. In the end, Harris was replaced by Michael Gambon, and Gary Oldman agreed to act, even though he didn't want to. He himself said that at that moment, he was broke, and he is very grateful to Harry Potter, together with Batman, for improving his financial situation in the mid-2000s. Because of all these things, the third film couldn't be released 1 year later, so it came out only in May 2004. There was no new battle with The Lord of the Rings. Cuarón refused to direct the fourth film because he wanted to focus on post-production of the third one. The point was, at that stage, nobody expected a failure anymore, and they started making the fourth film even before the third film reached theaters. So Cuarón couldn't sit in the editing room and oversee everything if he was filming the next movie. Prisoner of Azkaban became the only film in the Harry Potter series that didn't reach 800 million worldwide. It earned 795 million on a 130 million budget. That was still an excellent result. Goblet of Fire was directed by Mike Newell. He became the lowest paid director of the franchise. He received only 1 million for his work, and this was the first film in the series whose budget reached 150 million. There's one curious point connected to this film. The director and producers suggested to the studio that they should make 2 films from the book because it was hard to fit into one, but Warner refused, probably because the plan was to release the films with a 6-month gap, and the studio had just released the second and third Matrix films, which showed that such a short gap between sequels can end badly. The director said in interviews that the biggest problem on set was the actors growing up. The kids were growing right before their eyes. At the start of filming, they fit into certain clothes, and by the end, they had to remake everything. All of that caused the crew to rebuild some sets, place lighting differently, and plan 2 versions of shooting the same scene months in advance. Goblet of Fire was released in theaters at the end of 2005 and earned $895 million. And then Mike Newell left the next film, and he was replaced by David Yates. This is the film that had rumors for a long time about changing the actors. The idea came up back in Prisoner of Azkaban. The plan was, after that, make 1 more film with Radcliffe, Watson, and Grint, and then hire older actors because the kids were growing fast and could change visually in a not-so-good way. As I already said, it's a common problem with child actors. But after thinking, the producers decided they could use them to the very end. And since there were no contracts, everyone was expecting a major pay raise. Radcliffe got the most, $14 million. Watson and Grint earned $4 million each, and this film is considered the most cut down of all. It is based on the biggest book, but its runtime is shorter than every film, except the final Potter movie, which was half a book. The director said his version ran a little over 3 hours, and they had to delete several scenes with expensive sets. The final version runs 2 hours and 15 minutes. At the box office, Order of the Phoenix earned $938 million. Its budget was initially estimated at $150 million, but in the studio's documents later, it turned into $200. And because of later disputes related to paying out percentages, strange studio documents appeared. According to them, the movie that made almost $1 billion at the box office actually flopped. and the studio ended up $167 million in the red. And that's a common story in Hollywood. A lot of producers, actors, writers, screenwriters have a percentage in their contracts. They get it if the film is successful. Each percentage is small, but altogether it can be a big part of the profit. And then, different professional magicians get involved in the production numbers. Order of the Phoenix has an unreal figure listed for marketing expenses. Normally, with a 150 to 200 million budget, another 100 to 150 goes into marketing. For Order of the Phoenix, they spent 300, and they also had to pay a large percentage to the distributor. Warner Pictures makes the movie, but Warner Distribution distributes it, and it takes a big cut for that. Everything is absolutely legal and strictly within the law, and everyone who expected to get a percentage from the box office ends up with almost nothing. Half-Blood Prince arrived in theaters only in mid-2009. This is the biggest gap between films in the Harry Potter series. A full 2 years. Between all the other films, the gap was from half a year to a year and a half. In this film, Daniel Radcliffe was already 18. He has repeatedly admitted that he doesn't like this movie, and he thinks he was at his worst here, all because he was drinking a lot during that period, and he even came to set drunk. He also got $14 million for this film, but after Half-Blood Prince, Daniel supposedly fixed himself and didn't drink anymore. Emma Watson also wanted to leave the franchise. She says it was because she felt unnecessary in the film, but rumors, of course, say it was all about money. Half-Blood Prince cost $250 million. It is the most expensive Harry Potter film. They spent almost $300 on Deathly Hallows, but because it was turned into 2 movies, the budget for each one became much smaller. At the box office, Half-Blood Prince earned $933 million. Deathly Hallows was also originally supposed to be one movie, but this time, the studio didn't insist. When the producers suggested splitting it, Warner agreed immediately. The producers claim everything happened by accident. They filmed it assuming it would be one movie, but they filmed 5.5 hours of material, and only then they started talking to the studio. During filming, there was the famous story with Radcliffe's stunt double. He fell badly after an explosion and became paralyzed. Later, Radcliffe became one of the producers of the film David Holmes, The Boy Who Lived, which is based on the story of that stunt double, Deathly Hallows. Part 1 arrived in theaters in November 2010 and earned $977 million. The second film came out in mid-2011, and it broke several box office records, including the best IMAX opening and the best worldwide opening weekend in general. The hype was huge. Deathly Hallows. Part 2 became the only film in the series that earned more than $1 billion worldwide. It made $1,341 million. After the film came out, the main actors finally were able to act in other movies. But all 3 are still associated with the Harry Potter curse, because they still haven't been able to fully escape his shadow. Daniel Radcliffe tries the most. Some people say he succeeded. Others say that in every movie Daniel appears in, he still plays Harry Potter, and he will never be able to do anything about it. So that's how we went through the main story of the rise and the completion of the Harry Potter franchise, from an almost unwanted manuscript to one of the most successful film series in history. But the universe didn't end there. Next came Fantastic Beasts, an attempt to expand the world of magic, and a completely different story with its own problems, decisions, and failures. If you want a continuation specifically about that part of the universe, write it in the comments. Subscribe to the channel. Your activity directly determines whether there will be a continuation. Thanks for watching. Stay connected.